Hi there, it's Lerald, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Lightsmith, the hero talent tree for Holy and Protection Paladin. And if we look in the top right corner here of this little diagram, we have as the synthesis between Holy and Ret Paladin, Herald of the Sun, and between Protection and Ret Paladin, Templar. So this is sort of a fusion of what Holy does and what Prot does, and what that does is provide a lot of group utility, defensive utility, maybe some damage output of your own, and just a lot of damage reduction or a lot of shielding. And that's exactly how this talent tree starts out, with the active skill Holy Armaments. Now, this is probably the most complicated tree, certainly the most complicated tree that we've seen, but maybe one of the most complicated trees that we will see out of all of them, because Blizzard's stated goal is that this will be a system that doesn't really add a lot of extra complexity. It more makes you do more of all the things that you already do. This is not that. This adds an active skill that is ground targeted, and it is a pretty large cooldown. So let's just read through it here. Holy Armaments, active skill. Will the light to coalesce and become manifest at a target location as a holy armament which may be wielded by you or your allies. Alternates between Holy Bulwark and Sacred Weapon, lasts 20 seconds after being cast, max 2 charges. Now they put a lot of flavor into this. Coalesce and become manifest. Like they're really getting the Paladin sauce in there. The Holy Bulwark is a absorb shield that ramps up every 2 seconds. It goes all the way up to 30%, but it does seem to be basically like a refreshing, almost like a Celestial Brew or an Ignore Pain. It's basically this system is an alternating blessing system where you have blessing of Ignore Pain and then blessing of Hammer Infusion, because the second power, Sacred Weapon, makes it so that your spells and abilities have a chance to deal additional holy damage or healing. Now, we don't exactly know what that means. We don't know if that means it's like Blessing of Summer, which, if we type Blessing of Summer into Wowhead, that is an actual multiplier, a force multiplier on all of your damage. When you have Blessing of Summer on you, you have a 40% chance to deal 30% extra damage. So an actual 12% more damage multiplier. Or if it's just you have a set amount of damage that you can proc, and sometimes it procs and then it deals, whatever it is, 50% of the Paladin's attack power. We're not sure if it's an actual multiplier or if it's just a set amount of damage per proc. Either way, extra damage to put onto other players and shielding to put onto other players. So that's pretty interesting. Certainly it's something that you can cast on yourself. People are going to, but if we kind of jump out of order here and look at the talent right below it, Solidarity. If an ally picks up an armament, you gain its benefits. If you pick up an armament, a nearby ally gains its benefits. So this works like Blessing of the Sun Priest, Twin Sun, whatever the priest talent is that makes their power infusion also affect them if they cast it on somebody else. So you basically have an alternating skill, an active skill, where sometimes it's a defensive buff and sometimes it's an offensive buff, and we have gotten confirmation from Blizzard that it alternates back and forth with each cast, so there's not really a lot of gaming you can do to like get 2 damage procs in a row, but you can either throw this onto somebody else or yourself, depending on how much effort and control you want to exert there, and then they get the Blessing of Hammer Infusion or Blessing of Ignore Pain. Pretty good, pretty interesting, but we have no idea what the cooldown is. I think it's reasonable to assume, since it says it lasts 20 seconds after being cast, that it's probably a 2-minute cooldown. You have 2 charges, so that does give you a little bit of wiggle room in terms of being able to bank these up. Now let's take a look over here at Rite of Sanctification and Rite of Adjuration. Rite of Sanctification: imbue your weapon with the power of the light, increasing your armor by 5% and your primary stat by 1%. Lasts 1 hour, and it is a weapon imbue. I'm not sure if these will stack with the temporary weapon enchants, the smithing stones, that kind of thing, or if they supersede them. In any case, they seem stronger than like a tiny amount of crit, so I think that this is a decent bit of power. I have to say 1% more strength or 1% more intellect isn't exactly a huge bonus, but it is better than 0% more, so I guess it's okay. you know, it's kind of the bare minimum for it to really do anything at all. And Rite of Adjuration imbues your weapon with the power of the Holy Light, increasing your stamina by 3% and causing your Holy Power spenders to sometimes unleash a burst of healing around a target. Both of these are weapon imbues. They're obviously mutually exclusive since they are in a choice node. I think the thing that's interesting here is that Rite of Adjuration has the potential, even though it's obviously not going to boost your damage output, it's not going to boost your damage reduction either. You know, it only gives you stamina and healing procs. But if this is just a chance to trigger healing procs, it's not a real procs per minute type of design, then this could potentially add a lot of group healing in a Mythic Plus situation. You know, if you're hitting Shield of the Righteous over and over and over again, you might actually be triggering a fair amount of healing and providing kind of another layer of group utility. We've already talked about Solidarity, and now we can talk about Divine Guidance and Blessed Assurance over on the right-hand side. Divine Guidance is probably certainly one of the most disappointing talents in this tree. For each Holy Power ability cast, your next consecration does additional holy damage or healing split across all enemies up to a fixed total. Now, this is an interesting idea. If this did the damage when you press consecration, so like you've cast Shield of the Righteous 5 times, but since your last consecration, you press consecration and it basically does like a keg smash to everything around you, that would be a great design. However, the way this reads seems like it does that damage over the duration of the consecration. And because as things stand right now for Protection Paladin, and really any kind of Paladin that, I mean, exists, you have to move around quite a bit, and if you have to move out of your consecration, you're gonna recast it once you get to the new spot that you've moved to, so a lot of this damage could wind up being wasted if it's not all front-loaded. I think that is a fixable idea, and it certainly could be good, it could be appealing, but as it's currently written and it seems like it's gonna function, not all that great. Also, I would point out that both the Rite of Sanctification and Adjuration and Divine Guidance and Blessed Assurance, they don't really have any sort of synergy or any sort of interaction with the Holy Armaments, Solidarity, Lightsmith concept. I guess being a Lightsmith and enchanting your weapons makes sense. That actually lines up, but this over here kind of just seems like they're throwing some holy damage your way because light's in the name? Now let's look at Blessed Assurance, and I think this is a bit more appealing. Casting a Holy Power spender, so Word of Glory, Shield of the Righteous, increases the damage and healing of your next Crusader Strike, Blessed Hammer, or Hammer of the Righteous. Now, Blessed Hammer's damage is pretty weak, so doubling it, I mean, it's definitely better than nothing, but it's not a ton. It'll add up to a small amount more damage in Mythic Plus and AoE situations, but it's really not all that huge. In single target, in raid, getting double Hammer of the Righteous damage as a prop paladin, that could be something. As for Holy Paladins, I don't really know that much about Holy Paladins. I guess getting double Crusader Strike damage in single target situations will help your damage output a bit. I mean, it's better than nothing. It's free money. It just doesn't really seem like it's adding a lot of value in these talents. Again, I think all the value in this tree is really concentrated in Holy Armaments, and it's really determined by exactly how well Sacred Weapon scales and how much damage it provides for somebody else in your group, because there is the potential in this tree, just off of this talent up top alone, to be on the level of bringing a priest for another power infusion. It is potentially a force multiplier that makes other players' damage buffs and damage cooldowns all that much stronger. And now let's look at some stuff that has a lot more synergy with the Holy Armaments, and really just, I mean, that basically is the rest of the tree. Laying down arms. When an armament fades from you, the cooldown of Lay on Hands is reduced by 15 seconds, and you gain Shining Light or Infusion of Light. Now, Infusion of Light is a Holy Paladin bonus, a buff that I actually have it pulled up right here. It is a spec-specific buff that you just get for being a Holy Paladin, and it makes it so that when you crit a Holy Shock, you get a bit of extra juice on whatever your next spell cast is. For Protection Paladin, Shining Light is just the spell that makes your Word of Glory cost no holy power every time you've cast 3 Shield of the Righteous. So getting a free one of those, getting sort of a free Word of Glory when your armament fades is kind of nice. You know, it's a guaranteed heal once you no longer have your cooldown available. That's not bad. There is maybe a little bit of gaming that you can do where you can track the duration of the remaining armament on you and then burn your previous shining light on a word of glory, even if it's not on yourself. If it's on another player, just to kind of make use of it and then get that new free one, that there is some value there. Divine Inspiration and Forewarning are really the two best talents in the whole middle of the tree, I think, because we don't exactly know what the proc rate is on Divine Inspiration, but we could see your spells and abilities have a chance to manifest a holy armament nearby. So we're talking one of these. Now, how will this work in terms of which of the two it procs? Will it always proc a sacred weapon? Will it choose either a sacred weapon or a holy bulwark based off of what procced last or what is up next in the rotation? Will it cause the one that is up next in the rotation to rotate because it is procced? No idea on any of those. And even like, where is nearby? Is it going to land 5 yards next to you? Is it going to land near an ally? Are you going to have to run out of consecration to get it? Hopefully not that, but we don't really know. And then the alternative is just the more consistent option of getting a set amount of cooldown reduction on holy armaments. Now we can kind of assume that the cooldown here is 2 minutes. I think that's fair. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2.5. Nobody really knows, but if it is 2, then that would cut 24 seconds off the cooldown. So it'd be sitting at closer to 95 seconds on the base cooldown of this buff. I think that's pretty good. In either case, I think that Divine Inspiration will probably result in more uptime, but it'll be a little bit less controllable. So again, another thing we don't know is like if you have the sacred weapon active and you proc a sacred weapon and you pick it up, is that just going to reset to 20 seconds or is it going to add the time of picking up a new weapon into the buff that you already have? So many unknowns in this tree that really determine just how good it is. I mean, this could legitimately be the strongest talent tree in the next expansion, on the level of bringing like Propelli's already a must-have tank in raids right now, and it could potentially be as strong as it is and even stronger, and also bringing a power infusion level buff. Or not, we just don't know. All right, over on the right-hand side, we have Fear No Evil and Excoriation, both of which are very minor utility bonuses that I think are sort of oriented towards PvP. That would justify why they're so weak, I think, because for Raid, these are both basically worthless, and for Mythic Plus, I really don't see a lot of value either. Fear No Evil is a really cool name, though. While wielding an armament, the duration of fear effects is reduced by 50%. If that applies to both you and your allies, I guess that's some pretty nice utility for Raid, but in Mythic Plus for PvP. For Mythic Plus and Raid, the idea is that you're basically never going to get feared. You certainly shouldn't get feared in Raid or Mythic Plus unless there is some unavoidable fear mechanic where you could use the weapon to reduce the fear, but then you're not really getting any juice out of the weapon while you're being CC'd. So this is just kind of not great. It seems very good for PvP though. Excoriation makes it so that enemies within 5 yards of Hammer of Justice's target are slowed by 15%. These numbers are like so small. It could be a 15-yard radius and a 50% slow, and I would still think that this is kind of lame for Mythic Plus and basically worthless for Raid, but with it only being 5 yards and 15% slow, this is almost non-existent. But in PvP, I guess a 15% slow is good enough to like have some impact in a lot of situations. So, yeah, I feel like this is probably something that'll just get tuned up to be a bit more appealing for non-PvP applications. Shared Resolve. The effect of your active aura is increased by 33% on targets with your armaments. Now, usually as a prop paladin, you're running Devotion Aura, which gives 3% damage reduction, so this turns that up to a whopping 4% damage reduction on the person with your armament. Huge. But if you're running Retribution Aura and you're getting that up to 5% more damage, that slowly gradually ramps down to 0% more damage, then this becomes more like 6.5% more damage at the maximum. So pretty small. I think this could be double effect. Like this could be 6% damage reduction instead of 4% damage reduction. I don't think that would be overpowered. I think I would still be complaining about this being kind of lame, even if it were double effect. So with it being 33%, I think this is really like Blizzard trying to make sure that concentration aura in PvP isn't overpowered. Again, I feel like we've got a couple of talents in this tree that are underwhelming for PvE applications because Blizzard is worried about them being overpowered for PvP. But now we have some really good stuff here, like really, really good. Valiance. Consuming Shining Light or Infusion of Light extends the duration of any active armaments by 3 seconds or reduces the cooldown by 3 seconds if none exist. So how often you're using Shining Light, how often you're hitting Word of Glory is something that can vary based on the difficulty of the content you're doing. You're probably not hitting Word of Glory just the moment it procs, you know, use it on cooldown. That's not really how people treat heals. It's really not how you should treat heals. But the idea that you're probably going to use a Shining Light every 15 to 20 seconds is, I think, pretty reasonable. So every 15 to 20 seconds, you're getting 3 seconds of extra duration, or, and this is why I think this talent is so good, 3 seconds of cooldown reduction. I think that's amazing. One of the things that we've seen with, say, Necrolord Warrior in Shadowlands, where you had a banner that you had to maintain by spending rage, or with Frost Mages trying to maintain their icy veins throughout the course of an entire dungeon, is if for some reason that buff falls off, maybe you make a mistake, maybe you don't, maybe you're just doing a dungeon like Throne of the Tides where there just is a minute of running in between some of the pulls and there is nothing that you could possibly do to maintain the buff. That lack of quality of life is being removed by having the cooldown reduction if the weapon is not active. I think that this is a fantastic design that is something that should be expanded into other things. Now, that being said, I think Infusion of Light, I think a prop paladin or a holy paladin is probably getting a lot more use and a lot more just frequency of procs and consumption of procs with Infusion of Light than a prop paladin is with Shining Light, you know, on a lot of cases on a prop paladin, I might only cast Word of Glory a few times in a raid fight if I'm not really getting hammered. Why waste a global healing when I'm at full health, right? It's like a waste of damage, it's a mistake. So having this be tied to consuming Shining Light to using a heal as a prop paladin is okay, but I think that the value of cooldown reduction or duration extension should probably be quite a bit larger, like 5 or 6 seconds. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it could be 3 seconds more duration and then 5 seconds more cooldown reduction, something like that. These numbers are listed separately. They don't have to be the same amount. But in any case, I think that this design, even if the numbers aren't perfect, the design is excellent. And this really does add a lot of extra uptime. You know, we're talking about potentially going from like 15% uptime on this cooldown to 25% uptime, which is quite substantial given how big this shield is. You know, we have no idea what the weapon tuning on Sacred Weapon is, but we know that the shield is quite large. 15% of your max health, and then an additional 5% every 2 seconds is actually quite a lot of shielding when you're playing a prop paladin and you're really not taking all that much damage. This really does add a lot of steady defense, which is great. That is really what you need most as a prop paladin, is some sort of steady shielding or healing all the time. Hammer and Anvil, boring but not bad. Judgment crits do a shockwave of AoE damage around the target. I guess AoE healing as well. That's great. Not really anything complicated about this at all. It's just you crit, you do even more damage, and that's nice. We like for our single target damage crits to splash some AoE around. That's fantastic. Finally, we cap this all with Blessing of the Forge, and this is what really turns the turbo boost onto this whole tree, and what I think takes it from being something that's kind of on the fence between either being like really good or being kind of disappointing to just being something that I'm pretty sure is going to be really good. Avenging Wrath summons an additional sacred weapon. Now we don't know exactly how this works. Will it drop a weapon at your feet? Will it just give you the weapon If it's something that's going to interact with solidarity where you press wings and you and an ally get a weapon, basically you press wings and that gives somebody else a bonus, in addition to having the ability to hand cast holy armaments and give somebody a sacred weapon, you're not just bringing one power infusion, you're bringing multiple. And especially on a prop paladin who's able to get wings cooldowns down into the like 1 minute range, you're not just bringing power infusion like in the 2 minute window, you're bringing it in a 1 minute window, and then also the baseline skill that you're able to cast a bunch. Additionally, during Avenging Wrath, your sacred weapon casts spells on your target and echoes the effects of your holy power abilities. So this is sort of like a dancing rune weapon situation, but I don't know. Helpful light hammer. That doesn't really line up all that well, but in any case, you press Shield of the Righteous once and you get 2 Shield of the Righteous buffs out of it. Now, we don't know if the sacred weapon's damage is going to be equal to the damage that you're dealing, or if maybe more like Dancing Rune Weapon, it's going to be like 1/3. But even so, getting multiple Shield of the Righteous casts each time you cast Shield of the Righteous, getting multiple Word of Glories when you Word of Glory yourself, potentially getting multiple Judgment casts when you cast Judgment, getting like 4 Holy Power for a single Judgment. This seems insane. This seems like preposterously powerful. And Prop Alley's already in this situation where it is just basically mandatory. Like at the time I started recording this, of the 21 guilds that have killed Mythic Farak, 19 of them ran a Prop Paladin. And a lot of the reason for that is all of the group utility that Pallies bring. They bring Spell Warding, they bring Sacrifice on a 1 minute cooldown. For a lot of paladins on Mythic Tendril, they basically didn't tank the boss at all. They spec'd into all of the spot healing talents and they spot healed the raid, and they just let the Blood DK tank the boss for like 95% of the fight. So if you're able to do all of that and then also bring holy armaments, be able to shield the Blood DK while he's solo tanking everything, and be able to throw tons of extra damage at people in your group and give them extra sacred weapons every single time you press your wings, I don't really see how any group could possibly justify not running a prop paladin for like 100% of raid situations. If this is all really going to go through, you know, in the best case scenario where it really adds a lot of damage and a lot of shielding, obviously, and the procs are affecting other people. You know, Divine Inspiration is actually just functioning like a cast of Holy Armaments, and Blessing of the Forge's free Sacred Weapon is actually working like a baseline cast of Holy Armaments where it's going on somebody else. If that's all the case, this is insane. One of the most powerful things I've ever seen, and it makes me fear for the future. But I like playing Prop Paladin, so not really. It makes me happy, I guess. I think my only real complaint is like Shared Resolve and Fear No Evil. Fear No Evil, great name, terrible ability. Shared Resolve, this could be tripled and it would still be kind of not very good. In any case, I think this is very exciting. I think Prop Pally and Holy Pally, as always, look really good going forward just off of this. I am excited to see what Templar brings to the table. I would like to see one of these talent trees give paladins, prop paladins specifically, some sort of relief with the difficulty they have in having to constantly recast consecration every time they move. And they're not getting it in this tree, but they are getting enough group utility to justify running them regardless of that. So there it is. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.